I'm going to introduce now our speaker for this evening, who is Alan Hart. Alan is a program director for Microsoft, and he's led global programs for the last 20 years and worked on digital transformations. But perhaps more significantly for this evening, Alan's championed diversity and inclusion, and most recently been taking on the role of Autism Champion when he was with HMRC. And he's going to talk to us about his superpower this evening. So I'm going to hand over to Alan in a minute. He's going to talk to us, and then there will be an opportunity for questions and answers when Alan finishes. If you want to ask a question, please use the Q&A facility in Zoom, and we will also be taking questions from the live audience here. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Alan and to start his talk.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, everybody. Apologies, I can't be there in person. Travel for work is meaning that time pressures meant I couldn't get across from rural Wales. But thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. And we're going to talk this evening a little bit about autism and what it means and why it's so important for both us personally, but also for our profession, for our industry and our organizations. But by way of, hopefully you can see my screen and hopefully you can hear me fine. By way of an introduction, so who am I and why am I here? So as Simon says, my name is Alan Hart. I've been a member of the British Computer Society for a number of years now, both as a chartered IT professional and then latterly through the fellowship piece. Simon's kind of stolen a lot of my thunder on my first slide. I am a global program director for Microsoft, and I'm currently working across EMEA and significantly in the Middle East quite a bit at the moment. Living in rural Wales, married with 4 children, and I've been in the IT industry for about 30 years. So going right back to the early 90s of all sorts of things, of DOS and NT 3.51 and all those fantastic products, and the Val NetWare and all those great things. But I'm not here to talk about kind of the technical side of things this evening. I'm here to talk about the journey that I've been on with neurodiversity, some of the initiatives that we've been involved in, and then really hopefully leave you with a little bit of a challenge. So just to get at, set the stall from the get-go. I'm not an expert in neurodiversity. I'm not an expert in autism. I'm just somebody who lives with it every single day. I found out very late in my 40s that I was autistic, and we'll come on to a little bit of my personal story a little bit later on. But we also have a number of members of my family are also autistic. And as Simon rightly says, I was the ASD, as they call it, champion within HMRC for 3 years, and that'll form some of the detail that we get into this evening. So I love saying this now. I love telling people I am autistic. But the truth is that that's not something that I could say, that I thought I could say 6, 7, 8 years ago. When I started to realize that I was autistic and went on that journey, I was really worried about the repercussions to my career, adverse reactions. I was working at the time in an industry that was very, we'll call it old-fashioned in their kind of leadership approach. Whilst it kind of helped explain some of the struggles I've been on, I really hit it. And we'll talk a little bit later about something called masking as well. But the journey from being in that quite sort of negative place to where I am now is, and some of the things that we're able to do now and some of the initiatives that we've been involved in and are still involved in, is why I love to do these talks, and why I almost like to evangelize about autism and just help educate. So I want to talk a little bit about, first of all, just set a baseline of what autism is. We'll talk a little bit about what it means for industry, and as I say, I'll tell you a little bit about my story, and then hopefully we'll talk about, how we all can play our part going forward. So I think we'll start off with a little bit of autism sits obviously within the wider neurodiversity family, for want of a better word. And typically in all the work that I do with autism, it's much more about neurodiversity, not specifically about autism, although that is what I have and where my real passion lies. But we know within neurodiversity there can be Tourette's, dyslexia, ADHD, dyspraxia, and loads of other things. The question I always ask people when I give these talks, or when I'm in working groups around neurodiversity and autism specifically, I ask people, what do they think of when they think of autism? And these are kind of some of the things that I get back quite a lot, both positive and negative. Uncoordinated, creative, clumsy, socially awkward, intense focus, hyperactive, attention to detail. And a lot of this is shaped by the media. A lot of people will either talk about, at one extreme, Sheldon on Big Bang, or Rain Man, or those sorts of things, right through to kind of non-verbal depictions and other forms of media. And whilst it's fair to say they are some of the characteristics, it's a very skewed view of what autism is. I have a really, really simple view of autism, and that is, as an autistic, we see the world through a different lens. Terminology is really crucial here. You'll hear autistic spectrum disorder, or autistic spectrum condition, Asperger's, autistic. Lots and lots of different things. Myself, I just talk about, I am autistic. It's a very personal thing. There's a couple of key things that we really need to establish to start with. If you've met one autistic person and you understand them, you've met one person. Everybody is an individual. Everybody is shaped differently by being autistic. I shouldn't have to say this in this day and age, but I still do. It's not a disease. It's not an illness. You can't cure it. It's part of our characteristic. Unbelievably, even 2 or 3 years ago, people were saying, well, what can you do to get rid of it? I don't want to get rid of it now. It's me. It's what forms me. I describe it, and I work with a fantastic individual in Microsoft who is also autistic, and he has a fantastic expression of a hidden characteristic, and it's exactly that. It's a hidden characteristic. But by means of describing exactly what it is, I've worked quite closely with the National Autistic Society. So this evening, I've also brought along a couple of videos that they've produced. So we'll take a quick look at one of those videos, and hopefully the sound works.
Autism is a lifelong disability which affects how people, like me, communicate and interact with the world. There are about 700,000 adults and children on the autism spectrum in the UK. And like everyone, each autistic person has their own strengths and challenges. But all of us have difficulties with communicating and interacting with other people. This could mean not speaking at all, needing longer to process information, or not understanding facial expressions. We also engage in repetitive behaviour, doing or thinking the same thing over and over. This is sometimes for fun, and sometimes to help deal with our anxiety. People on the autism spectrum can also find unexpected changes, however small, very distressing. And then there is sensory overload, where noise, smells, touch, and bright lights become very painful and overwhelming. All these challenges can make the world feel very scary and hard to understand. And sometimes send us into physical and emotional meltdowns or shutdowns. It is very important that autistic people get help from an early age. But life can become very difficult if children or adults don't get the right support or understanding. Autistic children are 3 times more likely to be excluded from school. Only 1 in 6 autistic people in the UK have a full-time job. And over a third of autistic adults have reported serious mental health problems. The National Autistic Society is the UK's leading charity for autistic people. Since 1962, we have been changing society's attitudes and transforming individuals' lives. We want to create a society that works for autistic adults and children, and with your help, we can.
So hopefully that's giving you a appreciation of what we mean when we talk about autism. But these facts, I do this talk a lot, both internally, externally, and different interest groups. And these statistics stagger me every single time. You know, there's 700,000 people in the UK and growing, and that's just kind of the ones that, for want of a better word, we know about. You know, there are lots of undiagnosed people, but 700,000 people. Only 1 in 6 autistic person hold a full-time job, and only 22% are in any kind of employment. You know, if you really start to think about those statistics, 50% of people with an autism have have a hand-in-hand learning disability. I think, from my point of view, this next one really hit home, and it kind of underlines why education, advocacy, allyship is so important. Nearly everybody of people in the UK have heard of autism, but only 16% of autistic people and their family think that the public understand them, and 84% of autistic people feel they're judged as strange. And if you actually think about that, the large percentage of autistic people feel like they're judged as being, a little strange. And I absolutely, I've experienced that. And finally, just about 1 in 44 children now are identified as autistic. So some really compelling statistics there that hit home every single time. So what's it actually like to be autistic? And this is really important, and then we'll move on to kind of the benefits of it, which are fantastic. I always describe being autistic is like I've turned up with a rule book that doesn't actually fit what I've come to do. It's like I've come to play cricket with a rugby rule book. It's kind of the way I would describe it, because I don't quite sometimes understand, and I've learned through strategies and also through masking to actually kind of deal with that. And I consider myself very fortunate to be able to have those strategies and have the support and the mentorship and the allyship around me that allows me to do the role that I do. And my heart really goes out for those people who don't have that, and that's kind of why we have I do these talks as I do. One more quick video just on, whilst this is a child's view, this is absolutely applies irrespective of age. So we'll just have a quick look at this.
6, 7, 8, 9.
Take my hand.
I'm not naughty. I'm autistic. And I just get too much information.
So hopefully that gives you a view of what it's like, to some of the struggles that an autistic individual deals with. But that's only part of the story. There's so many upsides to being autistic. We've had lots about the negatives, but what about the positives? And I love this. There was a blog that Maureen Benny did, and I've shamelessly quoted her here. Some of the, let's call them the characteristics that are really positive for somebody with autism: attention to detail, deep focus, observation skills. That that's something I see in myself, and also within family members and people I work with who are autistic. The ability to really focus for hours on end on something, just absorb it, and then just keep repeating it. I'll give you an example I've used, and it's about my son, but we'll talk some examples about HMRC and Microsoft in a little bit. But my son, he's 12, and like every 12-year-old, he's into sports, and he can give you chapter and verse on the Italian La Liga, the Italian Liga Soccer League, going right back to the late 80s, early 90s. Matches, scores, everything, massive amounts of detail. And that's okay. You might think, okay, that's kind of impressive, but maybe not. He's never watched a La Liga match. In fact, he's hardly ever watched any football. He kind of doesn't really like football. He's just been able to assimilate those facts. So when you put it in the context of actually, he's never watched a match, he doesn't really follow football per se. He's able to give you chapter and verse on, going back to the early 90s of La Liga, or Formula One, or dinosaurs, or whatever. Within a few hours, he can be an absolute expert. Just that ability to absorb and retain facts. A couple of other ones, just to pull out from a positive point of view as well. Visual skills. It really. One of the things I've learned over the years, in the way I learn, I can't learn in the classroom. I can't learn, particularly by reading something, but I can learn by watching a video. And I watch a video on 2 times normal speed or 2.5 times normal speed, and I can absorb that information. But if you sat me in the classroom, I don't get anything. Again, just how my mind works. And in terms of other positives, tenacity and resilience is kind of burnt into you, but it really gives you that determination and challenge. And some autistic people have also reported, having a creative flair. And the one I like the most is integrity, and accepting of difference in others as well. Again, I find it really, really, really hard to not lie, but to not be completely 100% honest. And that's just something that I just can't do it. So there's some of the upsides. The benefits of being autistic. But the question for me is, why, if there's 700,000 people in the UK today, why are less than, why are only 22% of them in any type of employment? Why is it 1 in 6, is only in full-time employment when there's all this breadth of skill? So again, one final video, maybe just to help us understand a little bit, and then we'll go and I'll tell you my personal story.
Is it Stephen? Please, follow me.
Congrats on all the awards. So, tell me about yourself.
So, what would you say your strengths and weaknesses are?
Really? You don't look it.
Just so you know, the role has changed ever so slightly, but it's nothing major.
Let's find out a bit about you. So what experience do you have? What skills, what abilities? Anything?
It doesn't seem like you've had a job for a few months.
6 months?
A year. Why is that?
Okay. It's nice to meet you.
Thanks for coming in. We'll be in touch. Are you okay?
I'm not unemployable. I'm autistic. And sometimes I get too much information.
I think that's a really powerful video. I've actually been in that situation myself and reacted in exactly that way. I recall I was sat in Peterborough at a large insurance company, and there was an all-day interview assessment. And I'd been there about an hour and a half, and I was getting completely overstimulated, completely overthinking, and I had an absolute meltdown and left. And at the time, I didn't understand that it was autism. I just thought, I can't do interviews now, and a real detrimental effect on me. From a very early age, I always felt like I didn't fit in. I talked about, the rule book thing, but I was never sure why. Some things came really, really easy to me: maths, sciencey type things, computers, thankfully, and some things caused real issue. Sitting, in some environments, some smells would really cause me to absolutely not be able to cope. I'm now quite proud to say I've never been to a disco in my life because I just can't cope with the noise and the intensity of that type of environment. Even today, I still, I absolutely struggle today. But as I said before, I've learned strategies. I've been very fortunate in the mentors I've had around me and the supporters I've had around me. Even yesterday, I was sat with my, dropping my wife off for a dentist appointment. Somebody walked past, and I was like, he's looking at me funny. Why he's looking at me? Oh my goodness. And before he'd made 3 steps, I'd gone 12 steps down the line that, he was about to attack me or something. So, even now, I kind of have to have a strategy that says, okay, right, let's go back to basics. My son was diagnosed with autism a number of years ago, and it was through his diagnosis that I realized that actually all these things in my life that I had struggled with, that I either called stress, or I called, oh, just don't cope, or he's a bit weird, were absolutely the root. The thing that was causing a lot of them was my autistic brain. And as my son was going through his diagnosis, my wife, we were sitting with the psychologists, etc., and my wife kept saying, "That's you, that's you, that's you, that's you," and you'd be shocked about the number of people who are diagnosed as autistic later in life through a child, because of a child's diagnosis. It's a really common thing. But I was really worried about my career at the time. I just moved to a new role. I was in a global role doing large manufacturing projects, and I was really, really, really worried about how it would be perceived. It wasn't an environment where diversity and inclusion was particularly talked about. It was a very kind of typical manufacturing environment, and I was really, really worried, and I struggled for a number of years. Not telling anybody, but also not dealing with it. And if I look back on my career, I can see real peaks and troughs of when I've excelled and when I've not, and it's always come down to belief, having somebody, having a boss or having a leader or having a mentor that believed in me and gave me that confidence. But more than that, gave me that confidence to be myself. One of the key things that I had when I moved to HMRC, there was a lady who joined called Jackie Wright, who's actually at Microsoft now, and she's a big advocate for diversity and inclusion. Fantastic lady, and she really drilled it into me: be your authentic self, Alan. Bring your authentic self to work. Because if you don't bring your authentic self to work, who are you bringing? And she really challenged the whole kind of fake it till you make it type of approach that we seem to adopt as well. And it was through talking with her that I really kind of stepped out and really embraced being being autistic, but also realizing, and she really challenged me because she said, you've got a platform, and because of the role you do, I was a senior civil servant at the time. She said, you've got a platform, and you've got the freedom to actually really encourage others. So I stepped into the Autism Spectrum Disorder Champion role within HMRC, and it was a role that had been done really well by my predecessor in a very different way. But the thing that I was really, really acutely aware of was, having seen these stats, was how do we get more people into key roles, and give them real work opportunities, give them a career, bring them into, the civil service family or whatever, and really, embrace them into our working life. But more than that, there was a selfish aspect to it as well, because I knew that they would bring skills that we could absolutely, use, and there'd be a massive benefit to the team. So we, at the time, teamed up with the Cabinet Office, who were running like a summer internship type of a thing that ran for 3 or 4 weeks, where people could come along, with who were autistic and kind of experience work. And from that, we were able to start funding places that gave people 2-year opportunities, a proper job, a paid job for 2 years, give them experience. They could come in and start to work on this. And I was able to utilize the program. I was running a very large program at the time, so I was able to kind of use our own clout to actually get people into this program. But the thing that really stuck out was, it's all very well and good saying, okay, here's our ambition, here's our here's the roles we're going to do a selection process, etc., etc., etc. But the issue quickly became, okay, well, how do we recruit for these roles? One of the issues that I'd had, and again, I was able to cope with it, which was fantastic, but others couldn't, was the actual recruitment process for the civil service. For any of you that have been through it, particularly for the senior civil service, it's really, it's a long process. And not only that, you're doing exams where you don't know how long you've got. You're doing sort of maths exams and English exams and cognitive reasoning exams, and you don't know how long you've got, which is like red rag to a bull for somebody who's autistic, the unknown. So it was clear that we couldn't put people through kind of the normal come in for an hour, have a chat and leave type of interview. So with the HR team and with National Autistic Society, we really sat down and tried to work out, how do we actually bring people in and allow them to be their best for interview, and so they can really understand it. So not only can we see the best of them, but also that they absolutely understand the roles that that they're getting into, etc. So we came up with kind of a 2-day interview process, it started off by having a conversation on the phone to start with the candidate, just talking them through who we were, explaining a little bit about the environment they were coming to, sending some pictures. If they wanted to, I think one had a quick FaceTime around the office just to see, and things like that. And then we invited them down for a 2-day meet and greet / interview. And during that time, they came in, They came in, they actually sort of spent the first half of the day kind of just getting in the office, meeting people, and then kind of doing the job, alongside somebody for a couple of hours. And we really tried to make it as flexible as possible, because as I said before, you've met one autistic person, you cannot draw necessarily comparisons of what they need. It was about understanding and being flexible. So we had one guy who came down who the first day he came to his interview, didn't show up. He got too much for him. So we talked to him again, and he was able to come down the next day. We had one guy who came in and brought his mum. He came to the interview and his mum was there for 2 days. She was a lovely woman. We went out for coffee. It was fantastic. And then we had others who wanted to talk more about actually what it was like to be in the office and less about the job. And through that, we were able to find, a number of candidates who were absolutely fantastic. For the purposes of today, we'll call them, I don't know, Nigel and Dave or something. I won't use their real names. But these guys came in, and within days of being there, they'd already made an impact. I'll give you an example. Nigel, as we'll call him, came in, and he was working with a team who were doing some analytics of data. And we were trying to sort of consume his data and find the patterns. Within hours, he had found patterns, he had found errors. He actually thought the errors were placed there to see if he was any good or not. And it was quite humbling to say, no, they're just an error. And he made an impact from day one, absolutely from day one. We had other people as well who were less about, data analytics and things, and more about actually, do you know what? They wanted to do a repeatable task, that they thrived on repeatable tasks. We were able to give them those types of roles, it's bittersweet in some ways, because when I left HMRC a year ago, leaving that project or that initiative was the hardest thing. The program was originally, the day job was a huge big role, and it's fantastic, high profile, but the real joy and the real passion came from, seeing these guys come in and making a difference to their lives, and conversely them having a massive impact and bringing their skills and just a different point of view, to the wider team. And I think, the team as a whole really benefited from that. Since I've moved to Microsoft, again, Microsoft is an organization who embrace diversity and inclusion. They have a tagline: "Come as you are, do what you love." And it just rings so true with me. So these organizations exist, and for me, it's about how we kind of get that message out further and further and further. So I suppose the question is, if we know a little bit about what autism is, we know the good and the bad, the challenges, and also the benefits it can bring. Why is it so important, particularly for the IT industry, and why is somebody like the British Computer Society so intrinsic in some of these things? And for me, it comes down to a couple of key things. Firstly, our industry attracts a high percentage of autistic individuals. That maths, that science background, the analytics, the structured approach of the IT industry, of working, be it either a development role or a project management role, etc., etc. So it really attracts, a high percentage of autistic individuals. As an industry, they talk about the big, resignation debate at the moment, the big brain drain. We need and we want to attract the best candidates. If we've got candidates who have these superpowers, we want them in role, and we don't want to put them off because we've got some out of date or not fit for purpose recruitment process. We need to solve the big problems. We need innovative thinking. If you think some of the challenges that particularly, some of the larger IT organizations and partners and SMEs are trying to solve and work and deliver, we need innovative thinking to get there. And that's going to come through, having that diverse team. That diverse team brings that strength, in my opinion. It brings that different point of view. And lastly, from a selfish point of view, it's good for business. It gives us an edge. I very much saw in HMRC, as soon as we started introducing individuals, it gave us an edge. Problems that we'd grappled with, and in all honesty, we'd had consultants grappling with, that data analytics piece I talked about, putting somebody who was able to just completely focus on it, and putting a team in there, we were able to crack things that that we previously had struggled with. So that's all very well and good, but what should our response be? So I guess I want to challenge you a little bit today. I really want, I want you to walk away and think, okay, how can I do this in my organization or in my profession? The first thing we need to do is we need to educate ourselves. We need to understand exactly what neurodiversity and autism in particular, what it means. We need to be curious. We really need to, we need to educate ourselves, and then we need to understand it. Too long, autism has been misunderstood. In the video you saw there, somebody saying, "Well, you don't look autistic." I had that. I've had that exact thing said to me. "Well, you don't sound autistic. You don't look autistic. You're quite articulate, so you can't be autistic, surely." Family members have said to me, "No, you're not autistic." But when you actually delve into it, it's a mask. Masking something where it's more than just putting a face on. It's fundamentally, how you changing your characteristics to fit in. It's looking around. It's seeing how others are reacting to that situation, and kind of almost mimicking them. So we need to learn and we need to understand. We need to go further than that. It's all very well and good understanding, but we need a proactive approach. We need to become an advocate. We need to become an ally. We need to be somebody who actually is, eyes on stalks, looking for people who are neurodiverse. Becoming an ally and an advocate, for them. And we need to really challenge ourselves. We need to ask questions of our organisation. If one person left this presentation and went back to the organisation and said, "Okay, what are we doing to what does our recruitment process mean for those who are neurodiverse, for those who are autistic?" That would be a success for me. And just finally, what do we mean when we say, be an ally? How do you be an ally? What does it mean to be an ally? So for me, I've shamelessly stole something from an organisation I worked with as well called Genius Within. And they talk about allyship as being curious, really looking at something and being curious, engaging respectfully. It's okay to ask questions. As the TV advert that's running at the moment says, it's okay not to know. Ask questions, be curious, understand, be respectful. Understand though that autistic people are not less than. They're in some ways they're more than. Accept our identities and don't judge. I think the biggest one on this one from this is believe. I cannot tell you the number of times I felt that people have not believed me, but not believed the struggles I have. Once we've got all those sorts of things, we can start to normalize what it means to be, neurodiverse and autistic. And obviously, lastly, not forgetting. I think the most important thing for me is about building diverse teams, making these teams accessible, ensuring that we're speaking up for those who don't feel they can speak up. We're creating those environments in our teams and our organizations where those who have hidden characteristics can flourish. It's a bit twee, but I like it. There really is strength through diversity brings strength. And that's all I had to say. Thank you for listening to me. I'm very happy to talk. I can talk for days about this stuff. I'm very passionate about it. As I say, I'm not an expert. I'm just somebody who has lived with it for a number of years and every day gets up and goes to work and tries to work it out. Simon, I'll pause the screen share there.
Thank you so much, Alan. That was one of the most illuminating talks I've heard for quite a long time, and I really enjoyed listening to you. I hope everyone else in the audience did. I'd like to thank you in the usual way. It won't be the volume. You won't get the volume, but you'll get the appreciation from the audience.
Thank you.
Very happy that you're willing to take questions. I'm sure we've got some already. We'll take them from the audience and from online. Shall we start with online?
We'll start with online because it came in quite early on. So this is from Richard, and it was something that surprised me actually as the presentation went on. The Autistic Society video describes autism as a disability. Is that how you view it? I think he's perhaps asking at a very personal level, I think.
Yeah.
Seems to be the tone.
Yeah, great. Was that Richard that asked that, did you say?
Yes, Richard.
Yeah, Richard, do you know what? You've hit on the one thing that I don't like about that first video, I'll be honest with you. You know, that video is 2 years old. Terminology changes all the time. How do I see it? It's absolutely 100% not a disability. It's a characteristic. You know, it's you know, the brain, our brain is wired slightly differently. That's how I see it. But the rest of the video is really good, so I kind of forgive them for that view, I guess. But no, I do not see it as a disability at all. I see it as a characteristic.
Can I just mention something? If it is at all disability, then it's because the society disables autistic people. That's how I see it.
Yeah, right.
A number of autistic people would be perfectly able to function and work in society if they hadn't been disabled by it.
Thank you. It's a very pertinent comment. Okay, I'm going to use chair's prerogative and ask you a question. You've talked quite a bit about the recruitment process. Now, for a lot of people, the recruitment process starts with online, starts with submitting CVs to be filtered by computers, and then goes through recruitment agencies before you get through to the actual employer. And so the area I'm interested in is that whole process fit for purpose in getting the right mix of people and not essentially discriminating against people who don't fit a stereotypical mold that those systems are built around. And I mean, I have a particular axe that I grind quite a lot about agencies, but also about the online systems. And I try not to use either of them when I'm recruiting. But would you like? I think you're right. I mean,
I always describe particularly the civil service recruitment process as a bit of a supertanker that's, you know, trying to turn a super tanker. And you're absolutely right, particularly when there's an agency fronting the front end of it. You know, particularly neurodiverse people can tend to be filtered out before they even get through to any meaningful aspect of recruitment. But what I have seen, certainly with the organisations that I worked with and worked for, and you know, I'm starting to see a sea change in the identification of particularly neurodiversity. I know it's interesting actually, because I had a long debate when I was in the civil service. They have something called, and some of your people might know, they have something called the guaranteed interview scheme. But again, it comes back to classifying it as a disability, which is not right. So we went through a long conversation with HR about how we could, could we or couldn't we use the guaranteed interview scheme at the time. But I absolutely agree with you. I think though, it still comes back to the same things, and I think it comes back to educating our HR departments, working with our HR departments to understand exactly the difficulties that are experienced by neurodiverse people, particularly on through the recruitment process, and then following that through then to looking to fundamentally change some of the processes. Sorry, I can see a hand went up in the room then.
I put
So
my
we've
hand
got
up,
something
but
that's coming through.
we've
Could I
got
just
quite a
comment
few coming
on
through.
that one, Alan? I think for the I've operated a guaranteed interview scheme, and it doesn't work.
No, I agree.
Same people shortlist as interview, and for some people, they will be on an interview panel with people in front of them. They know they didn't shortlist, so they know that they've come through the guaranteed scheme, and that starts off on completely the wrong footing.
And that's why when we were doing, when I was working with HMRC, the initial pushback from HR was, well, do we need this? Because we've got the guaranteed interview scheme. And it was absolutely we do, because it's not just about identifying the candidates, it's also about giving the candidates the environment to succeed rather than coming into an hour panel interview. That's why we actually changed not only the process for identifying, but also how we went about doing the interview, assessing the candidates as well.
Okay. We've actually
Let's
got
take
5 questions.
Yes, take some questions.
So here's one that perhaps would be good to enlarge on. So this is from Ted. Thank you so much for the talk. You've not said much, Alan, you've not said much about the difficulty in recognizing other people's emotions and hence achieving effective dialogue. Is that something you can enlarge on personally?
Yeah, I mean, from a personal point of view, it's interesting. So I can't do small talk, and it's I almost have a strategy for small talk now. I love authentic conversations, but I can't do small talk because I can't react and I can't engage. It's an interesting aside, but I've loved lockdown. Right? I'm not a people person, so being locked up with the family has been brilliant. But also conducting the majority of my my meetings and things on Teams and Zoom has been brilliant, and it's been brilliant simply for the raise hand function, right? And that might sound a bit daft, but again, I have real problems with understanding when's the right time to come into the conversation. Even if I've got the visual cues, I just can't. I don't pick up on them. So the raise hand function was an absolute godsend and has transformed my meetings. I'm very, I kind of wish now when we go back to face-to-face, we can all start raising hands in the meeting room as well. But it's something personally that I, as I've got older, I've developed strategies. So I will start by saying, "How are you?" And I have a set way of engaging with people. But my wife will always tell you, I can't tell if somebody's being serious or joking very often. I struggle with that. Sarcasm, I struggle with that. But also, I like people to talk to me bluntly, and just straightforward with no aside to what they're saying. And I get myself in trouble because that's how I communicate. And again, that's where that masking piece comes in as well. So things like this, 100% I'm masking now. I have presentation now that I bring out for these things, but in smaller group interactions, I'm fine once we get into once we get into either a debate or a workshop. But that small talk piece, or particularly if somebody's getting emotional, I really struggle with.
Thank you.
We've got
Jeff,
a couple
let's
of
carry
good
on.
ones. Here's one from Andrew. Andrew absolutely agrees that there is a problem with the recruitment process. However, are there also issues around retention of autistic employees?
Yeah, one of the things that I haven't mentioned there, and it's what which bits you include and which bits you don't. There are some statistics, and I don't have them to hand, but there are some frightening statistics around the number of autistic people who end up either in a disciplinary process or are badged as underperformers, and that's principally because of either the environment they're working in. This is my opinion, obviously, but I believe that's principally because the environment they're working in isn't conducive for them, not to get the best out of them, or some of the issues and the struggles they're having aren't being the root causes aren't being recognised. but that's another worrying aspect to it. Once we get people in, building the environment, we want to keep them in. I could tell you some horror stories that I've been involved in and heard about. Autistic people who didn't want to be in the office. Were working staggered hours because they liked to be in the office when it was quiet. But the manager saw them as lazy. Those sorts of things. So yeah, there are absolutely some horrific stories around those. But for me, it still comes back to the same thing, and that's education, understanding, and building that team of advocacy and allyship.
Thank you.
There's another one on the recruitment process. I'm kind of taking over here. Is that?
That's fine. That's fine. I'm keeping an eye open for hands in the room, but
okay, please,
I'll take one in a minute. I'll take the next one.
But this one's from Paul. Would a recruitment process designed for autistic people also be a benefit for non-autistic people? Should there be a new standard?
Yes, simple answer, yes. This isn't about having a separate process for autistic or neurodiverse individuals. This is about fundamentally changing, recruitment for me. And this is happening. This is happening. I mean, even I've seen some. I've seen this in Microsoft. I've seen it in other organisations. I saw a little bit in some of the other cloud providers I worked with when I was at HMRC. This is starting to take hold. But this isn't about having one process. We need to get away from kind of, from my point of view, building a special autism process. This isn't about that at all. It's about fundamentally changing the process so that even those people who don't want to identify themselves as autistic, and that I get that people might not want to do that. They still shouldn't be disadvantaged.
Yeah, and my comment was that a lot of the examples in the video that we saw were bad for anyone, and you could see why they wouldn't work perhaps for you, but they would also probably not work for me and many other people.
Yeah, Alan, I mean, how does it seems to me we need a very flexible, almost personal interview process. You need to be very adaptable when you interview an autistic person. But from my experience, that would also clash with the employment laws that we have, where we have to deal with people identically. So there's a massive clash there. My heart goes out to somebody with autism if you're trying to interview them, but I would feel in a straitjacket because of the laws we're expected to adhere to. How do we deal with that clash?
Well, again, if I had the answer, I'd be lobbying. But for me, the thing we have to do is keep raising the awareness, keep provoking the discussion, so that those people who make the laws, and obviously working in central government, I was very close to a lot of the policy stuff that was going on, and lots and lots of great discussions going on at the policy level. For me, though, it's bringing it out of the discussion groups and into actual policy decisions to support some of this stuff. But I'll be honest with you, I don't have the answer to that. Completely get where you're coming from around recruitment law, making sure we give a fair and uniform approach. But the question I'd ask back also is, how is it fair if we're building a process that only works for somebody who's neurotypical or fundamentally exclude somebody? I don't have an answer, or all I'm trying to do is keep banging the drum, keep raising awareness, keep trying to provoke these discussions.
You seem to be very happy in your current role with Microsoft, but your path there seemed to have been a rocky one at certain points. So what would you advise a young person who is thinking of taking up a career in IT? What with the hindsight now, with the benefit of hindsight, what would you advise them to do?
So I think the thing that I've learned the most, and it's not really an autism thing, it's more now I'm interviewing the company as much as they're interviewing me. I did a lot of research. I did a lot of research when I went to the civil service to make sure that it was the environment I wanted to be in. And I did years of research into Microsoft before I approached Microsoft. It wasn't about, it wasn't a case of, oh, I've seen that job, that looks good, let's apply for that. For me, I wanted to understand what's the culture of the company. And I did a lot of research around, particularly with Microsoft. Microsoft talk a lot about culture. And I did a lot of research by reaching out to people going, yeah, but what's it really like? You say this, but what's it really like? When I've done similar sort of talks to graduates and those sorts of things, I've always said you need to research the company as much as the company needs to interview you. You need to be comfortable that is the company that you want to work for before you get there. The mistakes that I made earlier in my career and the positions I ended up in were because I went for the role for the wrong reason. If I look back on my career, and I sound old now. I don't feel old, but I sound old. If I look back on my career, the roles where I've flourished is where I've had the confidence from the team I work with, from the manager I work with. I've had a clear, from the leader I'm working with. They've given me the confidence to be me. Even back to roles 20 years ago where I loved and I flew. At the time, looking back now, the reason, looking back, I can see the reason that it worked for me was because of the personal relationship. It's something I see in my son today. At school, the lessons he absolutely excels in aren't necessarily ones where he's really good at. It's the ones where he loves the teacher, and the teacher, he knows the teachers, he feels safe with that teacher, and that absolutely played out with me through my career. The roles where I've excelled are those where I've felt comfortable and supported by the leader. So, my advice would be research the company as much as you can. And when you get to that interview process, you are interviewing them as much as they are interviewing you. And and it's so easy to say once when you're looking for roles and stuff. But there are some roles that there's some moves in my career that I regret making, where I've and I really struggled. And I look back, I thought I moved for the wrong reason. Even when I've had my concerns, I've moved for the wrong reason. So yeah, I guess that would be my simple advice, really.
Yeah.
I'll turn this comment into a question, perhaps. It's from Kath. Thank you so much for being a champion. Fascinating talk, and it creates real hope for my son, who's autistic and loves coding. I don't know how old Kath's son is, but we'll guess maybe A levels or something like that. What could you recommend to somebody at that stage in their education, at that sort of age? What would you recommend to?
Well, in terms of
a step. I'm an avid coder. I've been diagnosed as autistic. There must be lots of parents and children in that situation. What would be a good step around about O level, A level to make it happen? To get into the industry.
I'll give you a real world experience of an experience I'm going through right now today. So my son's 14, so he's just about to do his options. He is he is very, very high functioning. I talked a little bit about his party pieces around Formula One stats and La Liga stats and all sorts of things. He's definitely the guy you want on if you're doing any sort of trivia quiz. Definitely the guy you want on your team. But his interest is coding. He really loves coding. And we had a real battle with the school because the school has kind of moved away. They talk about information technology and not computing. So their idea of information technology was PowerPoint, and maybe a bit of Excel macros, which it was horrific for me. So we set out to find something that he could really get himself into, and we've done kind of three things. The first thing is he's put himself through. He's teaching himself a GCSE computer science course through WJEC, the exam board. So and we managed to find the school has sponsored him through that, but they're not giving him any support. He's just doing it himself, asking me some very difficult questions now about this architecture and that architecture and TCP/IP, subnetting and all this sort of stuff. So I'm trying to draft up all this information from years ago. But so that's the first thing that he's done. The second thing he's done is obviously working for Microsoft. I've really pointed him towards what's going on in the cloud. So he's actually now looking at, and he's actually looking at doing his fundamentals courses in Azure. So he's looking at AZ 900, which is kind of like the very first step in cloud certification. And again, because of the way he's coming at it, he's hoovering up, and he's able to then dovetail the knowledge, the theoretical knowledge he's building through his self-study of GCSE and the Azure certification he's doing. And lastly, but the thing that we really struggled with him was he was having fits and starts because it was all very theoretical. So we wrapped it up into a tangible project almost. And he's now, we've come up with something that's, that he can help an organization, and he's actually developing a system for them, over the next 6 months. He's done kind of, for want of a better word, he's done the MVP now. He's looking to iterate that now over the next few months as he learns a bit more and he goes and does that. So he's got a real world project that he's working on. And it's kind of starting to bring it all together. And that was the piece that unlocked it for him. When we gave him that real, when we found that real world project, it went from being, theoretical knowledge in his head where he was just consuming PowerPoints, ad infinitum, to actually something that actually was actually making a difference. And he could see, not only was he physically doing it, but he could see the impact on somebody else for what he was doing as well. Not sure if I've answered your question there, but maybe it gives you a little bit of what we're doing.
Yeah, no, I think there was some practical advice there personally, and I hope that helps, Kath. We've got one more here that we could ask. Yeah. Are there any changes you have seen introduced that have been shown to help everyone? I think this question means everyone as in autistic and those that haven't been identified as well.
Changes in day-to-day stuff or in recruitment specifically? Or
day-to-day, I'm reading into the question that must mean day-to-day stuff.
Sure. I think the biggest change that I see particularly in the industry now is they're embracing what it means to be neurodiverse and what it means to be autistic. If I even go back 5 years, well, actually, that video is a great example. We go back 3 years in that video, they were still talking about his disability, and now, they're really, I really start to see as we get, as we do more things like this, keep the conversation going. The biggest change that I see is actually, companies now actually embracing it and making a change. And what I love is that everybody's talking about diversity and inclusion, and obviously that covers so many different things. Gender, race, everything is a huge topic. But I'm really, really pleased that neurodiversity is actually now sort of in part as part of the conversation. And I can, if I look back even over the last 2 years, I can see a real change in some of this starting to land. Companies putting it into their KPIs around things, and how they understand and how the training. Give you an example: Microsoft now put all their employees through allyship training. You do it, there's a half an hour, 45-minute course to what it means to be an ally. Fantastic. And the more of that we can do, you can only help us.
Okay. Do we have any more online?
Yeah, there is one actually. I really would like to get an answer to. It's from Will. What do you advise someone who thinks she may be autistic but is undiagnosed? Where do they go?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. I was having a conversation with with a therapist actually a couple of weeks ago on this, and it's a really personal thing, and and there's a whole argument around self-diagnosis and versus a formal medical diagnosis. What does it mean? And I think for me it comes down to a couple of things. It comes down to what stage of life you're at. So for me, for my son, he was diagnosed through school. It was a very, let's call it a normal diagnosis process. But we had to really fight for it. We had to really fight for it. Too often these days, I think it comes down to money, particularly with councils and things. But hey, let's not talk politics. That's a whole other discussion. But I think it depends on what stage of life they're at and the impact it's making to them. I have colleagues who identify as being on the spectrum, have never been formally diagnosed, but simply identifying as being on the spectrum helps them understand some of the way they react and behave. So I'm not sure that there are some people who self-identification is enough. But certainly for anybody who's in education, I think the formal diagnosis for us, brought some protection for our son, both as he goes through high school and university. It affords him certain protection, certain help. For me, my diagnosis, whilst it was just a relief, really. That somebody else telling me, actually, do you know what? You're not a bit strange. You're not a bit quirky. Actually, that for a better word, there's a reason why you think like that. So I think it's a real personal thing. But I would caution anybody who is seeking to go through a formal diagnosis. It is not a quick thing. It's taken us. It took me, the best part of 18 months.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are there any more questions from the live audience?
Just maybe a remark on this. There's an organisation called Autism Oxford. If anybody's interested in getting a diagnosis as an adult, they can Google Autism Oxford, and there's a lot of information about which path to take if you want to be diagnosed as an adult.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no more questions, one of the things that I think has been very clear to me in this, that there's a big job to be done in raising awareness amongst the whole of the community and including the IT community. So, we will do a small thing here because the video of tonight's talk will go onto our website and be linked through to the rest of the BCS accordingly. I think the BCS needs to understand this more than it does. But I think there's an awful lot of things that need to be changed, not just what we've heard tonight in relation to recruitment, in relation to autism. Actually, there are all sorts of issues in relation to other people with different talents of all sorts, and there are things in that area we need to rethink, and raising awareness of all of the issues is terribly important. So hopefully we'll do a small contribution towards that by publicising what you've taught us tonight, Alan, and thank you very much for doing that.
Simon, can I just say a couple, two more things? Alan, I hope you're reading the chat. Are you able to see the chat?
Yeah, well, I'm just down to flip through it now.
Just complimentary comments, and there's one or two useful pieces of information. Jacob has asked us, could we reiterate what you just said? What did the audience members say? Can we type it or?
Yes.
Well,
Autism Oxford is the organisation.
Autism Oxford.
Autism Oxford, and they organise a lot of conferences and events.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, there's guidance on how to get diagnosis if you're an adult.
Okay, so if Jacob Googles autism Oxford, he'll get that.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll type that.
Simon, can I just say as well, I haven't put it on here, but please, if anybody's listening and wants to reach out on LinkedIn, I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. So just reach out on LinkedIn and connect. I'd love to connect with people to keep the conversation going.
So once again, thank you very much, Alan. Great talk. Absolutely stimulating and a lot for us to do. So thank you, and we do appreciate it.